Hello, hello, hello. Good evening and welcome. So before I introduce tonight's program, let me just do one quick thing. For who here is this the first time in this museum? Okay, we got regulars. I love it. All right, welcome back, everyone. So I want to say a few things about the museum, about the Lemelson Center. I'm Arthur Demrich. I'm director of the Lemelson Center, which is a unit that operates within the museum, and about Evenings at American History. And then I'll introduce Leslie Sibilic, who will be moderating and introducing our amazing panel. So the Lemelson Center was founded within the National Museum of American History to bring perspective from the history of invention and innovation to the present. So we look to engage people, we look to educate, and we want to empower. We engage people through programs like tonight's, through panels, through live programs, through interactions with inventors and innovators. And then we aim to educate people. We educate young people in Spark Lab, which is to my right, your left. You can check it out. We educate adults through programs like tonight, as well as some of our exhibits and historical items. So you'll see scattered around tonight objects out of the historical collections, materials that rarely see the light of day, related to tonight's theme. And then we want to empower people. So we really want people to be engaged with this period of rapid social and technological change that we live in. And tonight's program is especially important around that, right? So we're about empowering people to find the passion in life and break through the barriers that stop you from succeeding. The Evenings in American History events look to combine the power of the research we do, the collections, and our expertise into a unique experience. So we want to make history relevant to the shared as well as contested American experience. So it's programs like live events like tonight, panels, lectures, hands-on activities, as well as food and drink that we hope you enjoy. So tonight, as I said, is about breaking barriers. And those barriers really vary if you think about it. They can be technical, for example, in the laboratory, or as some of our speakers may address, in the fermentation tank. At Genentech, there's a famous line about the $1 million spill. So if you have a fermentation process for a pharmaceutical go bad, you blow $1 million at once. The brewing might be a little less, but it could be equally disconcerting. But of course, the barriers aren't just that. They're social. So people for ages have said, women don't brew beer. Women don't make great whiskey. And yet we're going to see how wrong that is tonight. And they're economic. So women received 2% of all venture capital in 2017. If you as a woman want to start a new company, the barriers are really formidable. And so tonight's about learning about that, engaging with it, and aiming to change it. So we're going to hear these inspiring stories. We want you to have fun, but it's also got a serious edge to it. So with that, let me introduce Leslie Sibilic. She's here tonight to lead the panel and discussion. She explores issues of popular culture and technology as senior curator at the Senator John Heinz History Center, which is an institute focused to the history of industry and innovation in Pittsburgh. A native of Western Pennsylvania, with relatives who once ran a bar in Pittsburgh, that was provided to me, by the way, I haven't been to that bar. She first explored the intersections of alcohol and history while researching frontier saloons in western Arkansas. Among other works, she's published on whiskey distilling in southwestern Pennsylvania, and she's currently researching women's roles in Pittsburgh's 19th century alcohol industry. She earned a BA from Gettysburg College and an MA from the University of Delaware. And I would be remiss if I didn't add that her home institution is a Smithsonian affiliate. Leslie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that introduction. As Arthur Damrosch has said, tonight's program is really a salute to women who have been brewing beer, distilling spirits, and helping to shape an industry that, judging by your presence this evening, I am sure that most of you enjoy on more than the occasional basis. Now, if we're talking about women and alcohol, in point of fact, that history really goes back to, frankly, the dawn of history. You can talk about ancient Egypt, Sumeria, ancient China. I promise this is not a history lecture, and we are not going back that far this evening. But you know, even if you're thinking of this nation as a fledgling country, and even before it was a nation, women were bringing their own traditions of distilling and brewing with them to these shores, and at one time, making beer, making cider, distilling spirits was a part of the kitchen and the hearth. I mean, it was part of what women did for their daily lives. And frankly, even after alcohol became an industry, and as it became a commercialized, large, regional, then national industry, women's roles shifted outside of the center focus. But, you know, they never entirely went away. If you're like me and you've spent time looking at the stories of women bootleggers, and I know you'll hear a little bit more about that at a couple of your stations this evening, or people who were doing their own distilling or beer making, you know that it was something that was involved with the heritage of place, culture, family. And even though they might not have been the people with their names on the marquee, they never completely refrained from doing that sort of work. But today, things have changed. You know, we have 4 illustrious panel members this evening who we're fortunate to have them here with us, and they're really talking now about not really the past of alcohol's history, but its present and its future. I think it's fair to say that in different ways they are all pioneers. They are all helping to create a modern version of the industry, and we're fortunate to have them here. And what I'm going to do is introduce each one of them very briefly and call them up. And if you want to start at the chairs over on that end, first I'd like to call up Emily Bruno and Julie Vernati from Denizen Brewing Company. They have a marvelous slogan, unified by beer. I mean, I can't argue with that. Let me check the order here. And then Carol Stout, who in various media publications has been called the Queen of Hops or the First Lady of Craft Brewing. And she's going to talk a little bit about this tonight. But we are fortunate to have her here from Stout Brewing in Adamstown, Pennsylvania. And then finally, Meredith Meyer-Grelly from Wiggle Whiskey in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who is part of a group that has opened the first distiller in Pittsburgh since Prohibition. And I think as we get started here this evening, I'd like to ask all of you one question, because we were curious. How many of you have ever tried home brewing, home distilling, even winemaking, cider? Anybody here has tried it for themselves? Okay, some of you. And have any of you ever dreamed of opening your own craft distillery, craft brewery? A few. I saw a few hands there. Well, we are going to talk to 4 people this evening who have kind of jumped in and actually done that. And I have to say, it strikes me in reviewing information about all of you that none of you started from paths that had, I'm going to open a brewery or distillery front and foremost on your life story. So you are great examples of people who found this inspiration, jumped in, and actually that is where I'd like to begin this evening in talking about how you got into this in the first place, why we're sitting here this evening. Starting with you, Carol, and thinking about this in terms of the chronology a little bit. As Arthur had said, you know, there were stereotypes and are stereotypes about women involved with the alcohol industry, but you certainly, as Queen of Hops and one of the first ladies of craft brewing, have been doing this for quite a long time now. I'd like each of you, starting with Carol, to share with us your aha moment. What is it that got you into this industry in the first place? How'd you just jump in?
Well, I think I was crazy, but I married my husband, Edward, in 1975, and I was a school teacher, and he had a restaurant, and we started the beer garden together. to promote the German Oktoberfest and other types of events. And I raised 5 children. My youngest daughter, Gretel, was approaching kindergarten. Do I go back to teaching, or do I help support the family business? So my husband said, well, I can't open up a brewery. It's illegal in Pennsylvania. Why don't you do it? So in 1984, we went to Portland, Oregon. For 1 week, we were on a trip with about 60, mostly males from all different walks of life. And all we did was talk about beer, talk about stainless steel, talk about hops. And at the end of that trip, I would say I never look at a beer again, or guess what? You get excited about it. That first conference, there were 54 people wanting to get into making beer. Look what it is today. Crazy. So, go back to Pennsylvania. We're all excited. And since my husband already had a restaurant with a liquor license, you can't open up a brewery, the 3-tier system. Brew pubs were only illegal in 1989. I'm talking 1985. I said, okay, why don't I do it? So obviously, being a former school teacher, I didn't have a lot of money. Breweries, stainless steel is expensive. So how am I going to get the money? And no money from my husband's business could be helping to open up the brewery. So long story short, my husband paid me for half the value of my home, and I opened up the brewery right next to the restaurant. He actually loaned me sold me the piece of land for $1, and went to my children's godmothers, and they helped me get some money together. I got a small loan from the bank, which was also very difficult because Adamstown, Pennsylvania, very Amish, Mennonite, really kind of poo-poo. Well, what are you going to do? What does beer smell like? What does it do when you goes down the drain? Anyway, I made it happen, and I'm entering my 31st year.
And so let's stick with the beer side of this before we shift to the whiskey. So Emily and Julie, if you want to talk a little bit about Denizens, who you are, what it is, and again, how you ended up being in the brewery business.
Sure. So Julie and I are former office dwellers. We don't have nearly as exciting a story as Carol, but we lived in Silver Spring. We're trying to figure out kind of next steps in our careers. We've both been working in DC for 10 years. I had tried a lot of different jobs and always was terrible at having a boss, and just really had a desire to start a business. And we thought through, I spent a lot of time thinking through, like, what can I do that I can really be passionate about, because you have to have a lot of passion to start a business. And running a brewery and a tap room is a great amalgamation of manufacturing, retail, hospitality, wholesale. It just kind of brings a lot of different things together. And so for me, no day is the same, no year is the same, and so it's a good fit. So I do all of the business operations, and I also oversee all of the. If you've come to our tap room in Silver Spring, I oversee all of the front of house service. And then Julie does all of the wholesale, so we have both a retail and a wholesale business. And our brother-in-law, Jeff, brews the beer.
Do you want to add to that story?
Yeah, so I can just add, what Emily didn't talk about is the types of jobs that we had prior to opening Denizens. So I was a senior policy advisor at the Small Business Administration, and traveled a lot of the country, meeting a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners. And it's really hard to be around folks like that and not feel inspired every day. And so I actually, in my cubicle, I had the agency mission statement, which is, is what you're doing right now helping a small business start, grow, or succeed? And I found there were days where I absolutely wasn't. I was shuffling paper, and I had gotten to the point where I wanted to make the leap. And so this was an opportunity that we could do. And Emily was the research and policy director at the National Women's Business Council. So she had done a lot of work on small business issues as well. But yeah, I'll end it there.
So shifting from the brewery to a distillery, Meredith, talk a little bit about your family's story.
Yeah. So I actually physically shuddered when you said cubicle. It feels, it's
Probably many people did.
yeah, it's well, a physical reaction. So for us, we really wanted to do something. We wanted to do something in the craft beverage space, but I left sort of a corporate food marketing job, and my husband a corporate law job to start the distillery. But before that, worked in community development and around redevelopment efforts around Western Pennsylvania. And we really wanted to use craft alcohol as a way to bring back a regional identity and regional stories. So as we thought through the space that we wanted to live in, while we love beer, we were really captivated by this regional history around whiskey that is unique to Western Pennsylvania. So in a little bit of research on a family vacation in Niagara-on-the-Lake to the ice vineyards, the family ice vineyards up in that region, this was 2010, so we were on our Blackberries, researching Pennsylvania alcohol history, and we learned that whiskey, American whiskey, was born in Western Pennsylvania. And Pittsburgh was the home of the Whiskey Rebellion in the 1790s, which had some pretty big, yeah. So, you know, all the guys were involved. Hamilton and Washington, all the boys were involved at the time. And so it was a pretty incredible story that we knew even our hometown hadn't really embraced and done much with. So that sort of set us on the path of whiskey. We knew that whiskey was the craft beverage that we wanted to set our sights on. So we came home from that trip, and my husband and I quit our jobs, and we roped in one of my brothers who's living on the West Coast to also quit his job. And my parents were just about to set into retirement anyway, so they committed themselves to be our volunteers in their retirement for at least a decade. And we have 2 more years left of that decade, so.
So Meredith touched on a little bit of this in her comments. We talk about innovation and places of innovation. Talk a little bit more about how the sense of place inspires your work. And that can be place in different ways for different people. I know a little bit because we're both coming from the Pittsburgh scene. I know a little bit more about Meredith's background with this, but
City of Champions.
how does place, not counting the black and gold side of it, how does place inspire what you do? Julie and Emily or Carol, how does it inspire or influence your offerings, what you do with the beers that you make, what you do with the institution you've created?
Well, Adamstown, Pennsylvania, settled by the Germans in the early 1700s, had a rich history of German lager brewing. And we wanted to bring back really fresh local beers, like what people would go to their. In Germany, you have a restaurant, you have the brewery first, then you have a restaurant and a guest house and a beer garden. So we had the opposite. So why not make beer? And won't all these, German heritage people just love the fact that they can now get fresh German beer brewed here in America. So yes, our heritage really inspired us. All the beers that we brewed in the beginning were traditional German-style beers.
So Julie grew up in Silver Spring, and we've lived there for a while, and we knew that the downtown Silver Spring needed some more options for nightlife and entertainment, and it's changed even in the 4 years that we've been open. It's changed significantly, but we occupied a space actually that had been cereal business. So a place would open up, in 6 months it would close down. Partly because if you've ever been to our tap room, it's on 2 stories, it's 7,500 square feet. There's a 3,000 square foot area outside that we've turned into a 200-seat beer garden, but it was just a parking lot. It's not near a lot of things. And so a lot of businesses failed. And for the first 6 months, everyone would walk in the door and say, like, good luck, like, we'll see you later, like in 6 months, and which is really demoralizing, so don't ever do that to anyone if they're trying to open a business, because when you've been working for 7 days straight, and, anyway. So, but we've been able to kind of help turn around that part of downtown Silver Spring, which is exciting. So we feel very much a part of the community, and I think the community really sees us as a part of it, and that works, it manifests in a lot of different ways. So we do fundraisers all the time for all kinds of nonprofits, and we also take stands on issues politically that we think are important for us as a significant member of the community in Silver Spring to take a stand on. So for us, it's less about a history, but more about being a part of the place and really being an active member, not just a bystander in the community that we're in.
And Meredith, I know you not only now have the distillery, but you've started another endeavor as well, which also kind of links to the place of Western Pennsylvania. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So we make a lot of products. We have a very inefficient portfolio. And as part of our innovation process, our new product development process, I taught a class at a university in town, and graduate students would develop a product over the course of a year that we would bring to life. So one of these years, it was an apple whiskey that we called Walkabout. And through the, thank you, I appreciate that. Through the process of creating that, actually it was an exhibit at the Senator John Heinz History Center where I saw a bit about Johnny Chapman, or Johnny Appleseed, who turns out was a Pittsburgher who started this frontier hard cider industry from Pittsburgh apple seeds. So he would set up orchards throughout the frontier, and he would start these orchards from seed rather than grafting, whereby you cut off a limb of the tree so that you create an apple tree that resembles the original apple tree, right? So by planting them from seed, he created terrible eating apples, right? But beautiful apples for making hard cider because they were tannic, had bitterness to them. So the reason he did this was because he loved animals and all living things. He thought every living thing had a soul, and he feared that he was hurting the soul of the trees by cutting their limbs. So that's the reason that Johnny Chapman started the hard cider industry in America. So in any event, when we discovered this history through our apple whiskey process, we again felt like there was this compelling regional story to tell. And through the process of playing with apples, we happened to have about 30 different ferments of different varieties of apples, different yeasts that we had been playing with, which we then distilled into apple brandy. So we have about 30 barrels of apple brandy, which there is no market in America for. But through that process, we fell in love with the ferments that we were getting out of apples. And we felt like we again had the right mix of, we had an important regional story to tell. We had interesting ferments to tell that story through. And so we created a cider house, which we just opened this past October, in which hopefully you'll try those ciders as well tonight.
So I think it's really interesting that all of you have these stories that talk about what your places mean to you as a location or stories. And yet I also know from doing some research into your backgrounds that similar to Carol's origin story about, in some ways, starting the brewery to get around certain regulations and laws, it brings up this idea that alcohol and the law have always been partners that dance or kind of contradict each other, and that legal issues form a part of the reality of doing this. So you've all found your inspiration, and yet I also know that you all overcame some different legal issues in terms of where alcohol can be sold or how you can sell it, which is no different than 19th, 20th century laws saying who could be in the bar, who could be behind the bar, who could make it. Talk a little bit more about the legal hurdles you faced and how you overcame those to actually realize your goals for a brewery or a distillery.
So I can talk a little bit about some of the laws that we had to get changed in Maryland before we opened. So how many folks here are from Montgomery County? Oh, cool. Hey, guys. So Montgomery County, Maryland, for those of you who don't know this, is actually the only complete control jurisdiction in the entire United States. So what does that mean? It means that if you want to buy alcohol, you have to buy alcohol from the county government, whether it's spirits, it's beer, or it's wine. And so it doesn't exist anywhere else. So we're opening a brewery, right? We want to be able to sell our beer and not have to sell it to the county government before selling it to our customers. So we actually worked really closely with some of the local county council people as well as state elected officials, because all alcohol laws in Maryland are actually regulated at the state level, even if when they're implemented, it's only on a county level that it's implemented. So we actually had to spend a lot of time in Annapolis convincing people that this would be a good idea. And the two things we got changed were, one, creating a carve-out for smaller breweries to actually self-distribute their beer into Montgomery County and totally bypass the county liquor control office. So that was a huge win. Not just obviously it benefited Denizens because we could do that, but I also think that it benefited retailers as well as consumers, because you'll notice there's a lot more choice now in the beer arena in Montgomery County because of that rule change. The other thing we were able to change is, it's funny, Carol talking about, restaurant versus brewery. The interplay between the restaurant industry and the beer industry kind of interweaves. And so for a long time, if you wanted to own a brewery that was open to the public, 7 days a week, had a tap room, you were also required to have a restaurant. And so at their core, breweries are manufacturing facilities, right? And so that's what you're making alcohol, you're manufacturing alcohol. But the law says if you want to do that and you want to sell it to people, then you're also going to have to open this entirely different type of business model and open a restaurant as well. So we were able to create a rule change there where if you open a brewery in Montgomery County specifically, hopefully this will change across the state of Maryland at some point, you don't have to have a restaurant, which allows brewers, especially new breweries that are opening, to just focus on making beer, and that's what they want to do. That's the business they want to be in. And they don't have to be distracted with all these other things. So those were two of the laws that we got changed, which was, I think, beneficial.
And Meredith, I know that your family was really involved in Pennsylvania with the issue to change a couple other laws as well.
Yeah, so when we started the distillery, we started working on the distillery in 2010. And when we would, we did all the focus groups at my house, and it was pretty much all of our friends who would come, for free pizza. And when we asked people what they thought of when they thought of whiskey, people said, generally, an older gentleman sitting on a leather couch, smoking a cigar, alone. And our challenge and our opportunity was to make whiskey relevant to an audience that had not been talked to by the industry in 90 years, right? So to do that, we knew we had to bring people to us. We had to break down all the barriers around whiskey that existed at the time. And that meant for us, we needed to get people to a distillery so they could see the process, get educated, ask all the questions, taste things in a really unintimidating and open space. So we essentially wanted to open a craft brewery style distillery, right? But that was illegal at the time in Pennsylvania, and still remains, this remains in many states across the country, actually. So we went ahead and we signed a lease in a neighborhood in Pittsburgh, which is higher rent than you would sign a lease for if you were just going to distribute your product widely, right? The smart move at this point would have just than to say, we're going to make one product, we're going to rent some space out in the suburbs or the exurbs, and we're going to distribute as widely as possible. We said, that's not what we're trying to do here. We got to get people here, engage, educate. So we rented this kind of pricey real estate in the city of Pittsburgh. We started building out a distillery, and at the same time, we lobbied over the course of 2 years to change a law. And we finally got the build out all done. The still came from Munich. We had it all installed, and the law still hadn't passed. So we finally convinced the Senate Legislative Committee to come and pay us a visit. They did a tour of the distillery, and I think they just felt so bad for us. They were like, look at these idiots. Someone's got to save them from themselves. They passed the legislation we needed the next day.
Great.
Yeah.
So guilt them into it.
Right.
And Carol, I know that the start for Stouts Brewery was because of the legal issues. How has the landscape changed since then?
Well, now Pennsylvania is up into the 20-some century. We can actually get beer in grocery stores, and not only in beer distributors, and we can self-distribute if we want. So yes, it's really changed when I started way back. Long time
And I think
ago.
listening to all of you, it's clear that when you have this idea, you have the craft of distilling or the craft of brewing, you have to overcome legal issues. I'm struck by some of the things I've seen. I know that Denizens, you have that great quote as part of your website on hell, there are no rules here, the Henry Ford quote. And Meredith, I think that I've heard the saying scrappy, not crappy, about what Wiggle does. For all of you, what do you think are the skills that you need and have needed as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, to get things started, to believe in yourselves enough to overcome the laws and to really jump into something that I have to think a lot of people looked at you and said, really? You are crazy. What do you think some of those qualities are? If someone came to you today and said, oh my gosh, I love what you've done, I want to do that, where do I start? What would you tell them in terms of what they really need to have as a skill set?
Passion, like Pennsylvania Dutch, stick-to-itiveness, and you will figure out a way to do something, and you just don't give up.
Yeah, I think you have to have optimism and passion, because if you're not really in love with what you're doing, it's really hard to work 7 days a week, which I still do 4 years in. So I tell the story when we were trying to get a loan, because it's very difficult to get money. I was literally begging someone that worked for the state of Maryland to move the loan process through, and he said, don't ever call me again. And I said, can I call you tomorrow? You just have to never accept no, and that guy really didn't like me, but we did get that done. So you just have to be tough about it, because people will say no a lot, people will doubt you, and you just have to believe in yourself. It's cheesy, but it's true.
Yeah. Yes. Relentlessness. It's never ending. And when I came early and I had the chance to go through that exhibit right there, which is amazing. If you haven't been through it, I recommend it. And that's what I'm struck with. All these people, just so much relentlessness. You just never quit. You never quit. It's the 7 days all the time. You never quit.
The only thing I would add is scare yourself a little bit, in the sense that, we spent all of our initial money, hadn't closed on the loan, and we were kind of freaking out. Our house was going to be collateral for the loan. It still is. And so when you have that type of fire under your butt, you're gonna figure it out, no matter what. So it's not like quit your job right away no matter what, although I think that's pretty awesome that you did that. Very impressed. I kept my day job the first year that we were open, but putting yourself in a situation where if you don't do this, your entire life is going to fail. It almost makes you more successful. Maybe that's bad advice, but that was
I
our...
call that.
Sorry, don't listen to me.
So I'm not a psychiatrist, but I think it's called generalized anxiety disorder. And it can be instructional and a benefit.
So it's as
That's a
if
better
give
way to say
yourself
it.
no option but to keep going.
Right. Yep.
So thinking of the spirit of innovation in a different sense now, we talk about innovation and invention as requiring both risk and failure as well as success. So you've put your house on the line, you've put your loan on the line. Now let's get real about some of the products and the ideas that you've experimented with. I know that from 30 years to 4 or 5 years, you've been in business for varying lengths of time, but give us a sense of some of, and maybe one of the best examples of a product or an idea you had that was a spectacular failure, if you've had that yet. And what did you learn from that? Who would like to go first? Admit that you had, what was your biggest failure?
Well, when I started, I did not want to have my beer look like traditional beer labels. I didn't like them. They didn't have to be red, white, or blue. So I got 750 milliliter wine bottles from a local winery. Thought, I'm going to have the beer served in these wine bottles. And my logo, I took it from my original logo came from a Pennsylvania Dutch coverlet. 2 deer on opposite sides with flowers in the center, which I threw that out and put the hop in. But I chose non-traditional male drinking colors, which were more pinks and mauves and silvers. Well, guess what? There's certain males that unfortunately would not pick up a bottle of this beer because it was too feminine. So I was a little stubborn, didn't do the market research, but again, didn't want to be traditional. So that was, unfortunately, I had to switch. So then I have Scarlet Lady back there. It's one of our most popular beers, ESB. And I was selling beer in New Jersey, and I noticed, I went to the wholesaler and I said, why aren't you selling this beer? Well, these salesmen that were 50, 60 some odd years old, males selling traditional beers, historically not mine, would not sell a beer with a lady on it, even though you have St. Pauli girl. So these are really weird things that you think in today's world, 2018, it's not true, but for me, was very true. Ridiculous. Today, I think you could do anything, but when I started, was a different. Now women drink beer. They've always drunk beer, but for whatever reason, certain males just want a certain color on a beer label. Not anymore, though, right?
When we opened up, we were very undercapitalized, which a lot of women-owned businesses are. So I think on our opening day, we were like, oh, we don't even have towels for the bar. We had to run to Costco and get some towels. So we made a lot of mistakes in the first year. And I think I had a little bit of a romantic view that the neighborhood would love this quirky new brewery and would just be totally accommodating to as we worked out the kinks, and they weren't always that way. I learned very quickly that when you open your doors to the public comes in, and sometimes people have expectations, and there's it takes a while with a new business to establish what your brand identity is so that you can convey that very clearly in the brand experience that people have, and so that you can manage it so that people are not walking in expecting something. For example, still even to this day, but it was definitely a lot more in the beginning, just conveying what a brewery was. Our name was Denizens Brewing Co. That was on the front door. I thought it was pretty self-explanatory, but people would walk in and be like, can I get a Miller Lite? And so there's a lot of that. And so it's the combination of just sort of establishing the brand and trying to communicate to folks so that they they knew what they were walking into. You could deliver what you wanted to them, and then just like working out mistakes, that lots of them that we made. It happens.
Yeah, I'm going through the like Rolodex of mistakes. I mean, so many. I mean, the heartening thing about that is you can fuck up so many ways, so many times, and still be going strong. 8 years in, we're still here. So, I mean, we've made mistakes in terms of strategy, in terms of people, like things that matter a lot, right? And we're always working to get better at those. But I think, I think you asked product, Leslie, so I'm gonna respect
Or
the green.
idea. It can be either one.
Okay, well, we've
Just
got
your
plenty of
greatest failure
All right.
in what you learned.
Okay, I don't think this is our greatest failure, but it's a pretty funny one. We develop a lot of products. One of the products we did was one that it was a pawpaw liqueur. Are you familiar with pawpaws? Of course you're not. Oh, you are. It's a fruit. It is a fruit. You're at the Smithsonian on a Friday night. If anyone's gonna know what a pawpaw is, it's this group. Yeah, it's this crazy weird fruit that was, it like fueled Lewis and Clark supposedly across the United States on their expedition. It's this cross between a mango and a banana, somewhat indigenous to Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Michigan. So we decided we were going to make a liqueur out of pawpaws. We bought all of the pawpaw pulp available in the United States of America to produce this pawpaw liqueur. I think it was, Allison can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was something like $14,000 of pawpaw. Oh my God. And so the pulp was pressed for us by the only processor of pawpaw in America, who's in Michigan. So they shipped us all of their pawpaw. I mean, when they got that email, they were probably like, what? We never thought this was a real business. Then Wiggle Whiskey came along, and they bought all our pawpaw pulp. So we bought all their pawpaw pulp. We produced this pawpaw liqueur, and then, all of our staff took it home that night to try it before we released it. I mean, everyone had tried it up to then, but took a bottle home to play with it, to come up with cocktails, whatever. And the next morning, everyone came in white-faced. They had all been vomiting all night. Because if you get any pawpaw seeds or skin into the pulp, it induces vomiting. So we dumped the pawpaw liqueur.
And what did you learn from that?
Stay away from pawpaws.
I think that also that was beyond anything I was expecting that someone would bring up. As
We've
a worst
screwed up a lot.
example. You've won that prize, but that reminds me. Talk a little bit more, any of you, about what role curiosity plays in what you do, because it strikes me, and some of you have fascinating backgrounds, from kindergarten teacher to, I think, Julie, is it you? You have a relative who was with the Women's Christian Temperance Union.
Yeah, my great grandmother. Yeah.
Talk about what role curiosity plays in driving these desires, the dreams you have, even the unfortunate experiment with the pawpaws.
That's a fantastic story, by the way. I'm sorry you dealt with that. For me, I think I am a very curious person by nature, and I love people. And so for what I do for the company is I run wholesale, I run business development, and so the way curiosity sort of shows itself in my everyday is going around and making sales calls and meeting new people and learning about what it is that what they need so that I can be a better salesperson and provide products that they want. And really, it's just learning about all of the different. We live in an amazing area. There are so many really, really strong and smart and just badass people who are opening businesses around here. And so I encourage all of you to be curious about that and get to meet them and visit their visit their locations, whether it's your local distillers, your local wineries, your local breweries, or your local restaurants or craft makers. So yeah, for me, I think that's where my curiosity really plays itself, is really just learning about the community and meeting people and learning about beer every day.
I would add for Denizens, we have like a learning culture that we try to really integrate into everything we do. And you can overdo it sometimes. I definitely learned that in the first year or two, that we would pivot, you know, like if we got some feedback on something, whether it was from a customer or from a staff member or something, we would change approaches, and that can create some frenetic feelings to the team. So I learned over the first year or two to really look for the patterns early and quickly, but you know, pick up on what's a significant piece of information that we needed to change, make a change about, or what we needed to just ride out a little bit, and just learning that flow. But we're very agile. So part of the reason why I think we survived as a young business was just because if something didn't work, and if we were getting negative feedback, like, we changed. And I think that's the exciting part about having worked in the federal government, it's an exciting part about working for a young company, because if you want to change something, you just do it, like tomorrow. So we really try to learn constantly. We do after actions of every event that we do to just capture what worked really well, so we know we can replicate it. And we're just constantly trying to improve.
Carol?
I was just thinking about, for me, starting as a traditional German-style brewery, reacting to the market, doing English ales, doing non-traditional beers that aren't even the beer style guidelines, now looking to source ingredients just from Pennsylvania. These things are really exciting, and because, you know, we are independent, very important in the craft line. We can really react to the market and please not only our customers, but also please ourselves and the people that are working with our products.
Yeah, I mean, curiosity certainly drives our business. We develop a new product every month. So we are a very curious bunch, and that's what we hire for on our team, is curiosity first and foremost. I think, though, what Carol said, I mean, I think the trick is bridging that curiosity over the long haul, because, I mean, that's incredible to be in this business that has changed so tremendously over the past 3 decades. That takes real ingenuity to figure that out.
I think it's survival. And I think before, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say one thing. I mean, we're all independent entrepreneurs. There are a lot of craft breweries, brew pubs, distilleries, wineries in this country, and I think you really need to look to help support the independent spirit, because it's very tough, because we have a lot of things out of our control that are constantly batting at our doors to try to inhibit our access to the marketplace. So it's like buy fresh, buy local. Go to your market, go to your local brewery, go to your local distillery. We don't want to go back to when I started. It was the only craft brewery in Pennsylvania. It was maybe one of 17. Now there's thousands. We don't want to go back so that we don't have choice for the consumer and for you. That's very important. Thanks.
And when we talk about how this industry and how the realm of the craft brewery or the craft distillery has changed, certainly multiple people up here have alluded to it this evening, and in the introductory remarks as well, this idea of women as part of these industries. And I know, you know, that there have been a couple different dialogues about the craft brewing world versus craft distilling, and the role of women, the impact of stereotypes, changes over time. I don't want to kind of segment it out into the craft brewing or the craft distilling, but I'd be really curious for each of you to share with us just your philosophy about the role and impact of women as makers and as consumers. How is it changing? Is it changing the market today? Is it changing the industry today?
So I guess I'll answer that question this way. So I sit on the board of directors for the Brewers Association, which is the national trade organization for small and independent breweries across the country. And thank you. And last year, one of the initiatives we took was to create a diversity committee. And so I chair that committee now. And one of the things that we are looking at is, how do we diversify not only internal to our industry, the people that work for our breweries, and then up and down the value chain, our raw material suppliers, our distributor partners, our retailers, but then also looking at how do we diversify our consumer audience. I think there's a very stereotypical idea that's sort of akin to the research you were doing with the man lonely drinking whiskey and smoking a cigar, that people who drink beer and people who make beer are white, straight men. And that's certainly true, but they're not the only people who drink beer. And I think that it is really, really important. I think representation really matters. I've had experiences even, obviously I'm a woman, but also as an out gay person, I've been in circles of people that me being in that circle made people change their behavior a little bit because I happen to be standing there. And I think that's important to have a diverse group of people working in an industry and around an industry. And so I'm really excited about taking over the diversity committee and what we're going to do with it in the future.
Yeah, I just echo that. I think at Denizens, we want, one of our missions in our tap room is to make craft beer accessible to everybody. So we didn't want anyone to feel, if you're first time visiting a brewery, we didn't want you to feel overwhelmed by that or intimidated by it or be bougie or snotty about it. And so whether you're drinking craft beer for the first time and you have a bunch of questions, or you know what you're looking for and you're looking for our latest sour beer, we are open to everybody, and our tap room reflects that. And we're holding our fundraisers for Planned Parenthood all the time. So we're putting our values forward with what we do.
So the first whiskey conference I went to, it was like at a Hilton or a Marriott, in I don't know where, and the dinner, was just one of those terrible conference hotel dinners, and they had like entertainment, but they didn't tell us ahead of time what the entertainment was. And at some point in the dinner, I looked up, and there was like a woman dancing. And then I looked up again, and she had pasties on. And I realized it was a strip show at our conference. And right, so I looked at my husband, and I was like, I think I have to I think I have to leave. I think I have to make a stand, leave the room, and I'm hungry. And he was like, the food's shitty anyway. So we walk out, whatever. But we've come a long way as an industry in whiskey. I mean, our business is 49% women. 49% of the dollars that come into our business, our whiskey business, are spent by women. So I don't really know what the breakup of our team is, but it's probably a majority women. I mean, we definitely have a strong presence in the company. And now what we're doing is we're really this year very intensively focused on broadening to other populations that we're not as good as talking with. So we're hosting the first national Black Brewers Festival at our cider house this year, which we're pretty excited about. We're bringing in brewers from all over the country. And we're just starting several efforts this year to start telling stories beyond the stories we've been telling. And what we've found is it's real easy to attract women when you have visible women. And we think that the same is probably true if we start doing a better job representing other populations too.
Do you want to add anything to that, Carol? So where do you see your business going from here? What's next for you in terms of big ideas? Or we can discuss the planning needs of
Carol,
small
I think it's your
independent
turn to speak.
businesses.
I think I mentioned
Who
that the
wants-
last time. I just want to make sure that we survive in the next several years and continue on. And things are challenging right now. Large wholesalers are preventing access to market. Large breweries like I guess I shouldn't say anything, but yes, large breweries like Anheuser-Busch, like Heineken, they're buying up craft breweries, and guess what? You know, they're selling those beers to my customers half the price of what I need to charge. So these are real challenges. And yeah, so the main thing is just to word of mouth and just refuse to buy beers that look at their source, look at if they're independent, look where they're coming from. I don't care whether the beer is good or not. There's so many great beers out there. You don't need a certain beer. And if it's bought, if the reins are by a large company, don't buy it. Because we won't survive.
And to
I'm
add to
trusting that there's
the,
no part of these programs that was sponsored by Anheuser-Busch or someone this evening.
I hope that it's not.
Thank God
right?
I don't have an
Okay.
AB wholesaler
There
in
you
the house.
go. One thing I just wanted to follow up on that. The Brewers Association actually released a seal that is going to be going on. It's called it's Certified Independent. So look for that seal. It's an upside down beer bottle, and it says Certified Independent. And so we have it on all of our packaging on our cans. A lot of other breweries, I think it's over 3,100 of the small and independent breweries have adopted the seal already. And we just released it about 6 months ago. So it matters, and please, echo what Carol said. Just support your local independent breweries.
Yeah, and we always say, we aspire to create a company whose value grows as consumer education grows, and consumer education certainly continues to grow year on year in our space. We really see the future of spirits, and certainly our ciders, as this regionalization and this idea of building out more of a case around terroir in whiskey, which is not really the conversation right now. So historically, regions had very specific qualities and tastes to their spirits. Pittsburgh's whiskey was called Monongahela Rye, and we've done a fair amount of research around rye and what might have contributed to that in our agricultural community. And we've done a lot of work around building a local supply chain that is pretty mighty at this point. So we'll continue to go down that road, because I think for spirits, certainly the greatest protector to what is still a very consolidated market is this regional identity and uniqueness that wine has been so effective at building. But for us, we see the same sort of threats. We've had the last 3 weeks, we've had carloads of gentlemen from Beam come visit us. And when that stuff happens, it's a little creepy, right? And the best thing we can do is just continue to work to create a really differentiated taste profile that they cannot replicate.
So we are in the midst of all of that potential challenge. We're working on an expansion. So we've outgrown our space in Silver Springs, and we are, well, it's an urban area. We're metro accessible. But we are working on a second location with a larger brewery, so we can increase our wholesale distribution throughout Maryland and DC and Virginia. And It's a lot of work. It's occupying a lot of my time right now, but it's exciting.
So if someone walked up to you and asked you today, what would you do differently over your past history? Is there something that you would change? And if so, what is that one piece of your past, whether it's a mistake or something that you didn't try?
Is this like specific to our companies or like in life in general?
Something specific
I have
to
a
the
lot of
role, to
examples
the
of this.
the idea of women in alcohol. I'm sure that there are other answers, but let's keep it within that.
We'll keep it PG. Okay, so
PG, thank you, yes.
So when we first started, I was running the wholesale, and we self-distribute our beer. So we don't have a distributor. It's us doing it. So you may see me sometimes driving around DC during the week, hauling kegs into bars and restaurants and delivering cans to package stores. And I had to teach myself how to do that. I didn't come from a job or an industry where I had distributed beer before. So I think that if I could go back and do it differently, in a perfect universe, I wish that I had all the systems that are in place now that I could have started from the beginning. Because, I was working on like Excel spreadsheets and stuff. It's super inefficient tracking, and now we have legit brewery management software, so I can create invoices, and I know exactly the last time I spoke to my customer. And so that's something I wish I would have done. I wish we would have put those systems in place day number one instead of building the plane while we're flying it and trying to figure it out and having to backtrack everything.
And I know, Meredith, I've seen in some of your writings that you've kind of said to the past to people that it was better that you didn't know what was ahead, that it's better that you didn't know everything, that you can never know all the data, you can never know all the pieces. Do you still feel that way? I think that was from a Tepper Business School profile a few years back.
Yeah, I think a certain amount of naivete is helpful. Yes. I will say, like, when we started this cider house this year, it was going back almost to startup mode, except this time we had 110 staff members that we had to bring back to startup mode with us to start this second company. And it felt different knowing the stages this time around, but having folks who maybe didn't live through it the first time around, that we had to say, no, it's gonna get better. I promise. It's gonna suck. It's still gonna suck. It's gonna suck some more, and then it's gonna get better. It's gonna suck again, then it's gonna get better. So I think having a lack of knowledge is helpful because you just don't look too far ahead of yourself. It's like having when you have a kid, everything's a stage. We're going to get through this. Then there's going to be another weird stage that we have to explain to teachers or relatives or whatever. Then we'll get through that. But not knowing it all. I don't want to know what adolescence is.
And Carol, thinking back over 30 years, a remarkable span in this business. I mean, what comes to your mind as something that you might do differently or maybe not?
I don't think so. I mean, I made mistakes, but I don't think I would have known. And a lot of the resources weren't available, like a bottling line, 12-ounce bottling line. What I have today wasn't available to me way back in 1987. Canning. I never would have thought of putting beer in a can because the cans weren't great then, but now they're great. So I don't know. I think I did the best. I think I did the best I could.
And so I think time check here with are we at the point where I know we want to open the floor up to questions. I guess we'll go ahead. We'd like to welcome anybody who has a question for our panelists here this evening. Go ahead.
I live in Maryland, so this is going to be for denizens. I I guess on Facebook, there's been a lot of talk about the new laws in Maryland, the French law, et cetera. Mm-hmm. What can we do to help you guys out with making sure that Guinness doesn't screw it up for everybody? By the way, I'm boycotting them this St. Patrick's Day.
Okay.
There are a lot of other stouts.
Yeah.
Yes, there are.
So, first of all, contact your legislators. You have 3 delegates and you have a state senator. Contact all of them and tell them that you want them to support laws that will help breweries. The backstory to this is that you've got the distributors and the retailers, mostly the distributors though, who are trying to stop breweries from growing. And these guys have had relationships in Annapolis for decades. Our industry is a lot smaller and newer. Actually, we're larger now than the distributors are, but we're newer. We don't have those long-standing relationships. And so a lot of these legislators, A, are not educated on what breweries actually are and what they do for their communities. And B, they're just taking advice from their old pals that they've been talking to for decades. So call your legislators, email your legislators, be active on social media, and just tell people to support breweries.
And as a quick context, so people talk about the 3-tier system, and there are franchise laws where if you sign with a wholesaler in Maryland, it is a very, very high burden to exit that agreement. And so for young breweries, it doesn't make a lot of sense because you're not making that much beer, you don't have that much market share, you need time to grow it. And so Maryland is trying to, there are people in Maryland trying to make it easier for breweries to start, grow, and succeed. And states like Virginia are doing a great job at this. DC's come a long way too, but Maryland is actually going the opposite way. So if you live in Maryland, it's really important. These distributors who have monopolies over what you can buy on the shelves are trying to make it more difficult for breweries to exist.
Other questions? Go ahead.
I had to write it down. So when I think about craft beverages, to me, they seem more like an extension of traditionally domestic tasks, like cooking and baking, science at a larger liquid scale. So what do you think it is about brewing and distilling that have created this gender imbalance, that have created a male-dominated industry and something that was maybe traditionally like an extension of a domestic task, especially when I heard what you were talking about at the intro?
Well, it goes back to history. Women were the first brewers because it was part of food making. And then it changed with the Industrial Revolution.
I think they want us to repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Does someone have the microphone here? Could we repeat the question from front? Thanks.
Sorry. So my question was for an industry like craft brewing or distilling, which to me seemed like an extension of a traditionally domestic task of cooking and baking. What is it about brewing and distilling that has created a traditionally male-dominated industry as we know it and refer to it now, as opposed to one that has more female entrepreneurs and presence?
And go back to what you were answering.
Yeah, the Industrial Revolution. It became, once beer production became factory making, the women, it became a man's domain. And it's continued that way until just recently, with maybe in the last 30, 40 years. And this is really funny. Women never drank beer. They made it, but they didn't drink beer, during the Industrial Revolution. They drank wine, but they didn't drink beer, and they didn't drink whiskey. They didn't drink distilled spirits. So it was all of the persona. There were bars in Reading in 1987, Stanley's Tap Room on Moore Street. I went in there, and the owner, I was there with a salesman, not to sell my product. I was just with him for observation. He said, "Excuse me, you need to sit in the room next door." I said, "What?" I said, "I'm here with the beer salesman to promote my beer." He said, "No, the ladies sit next door. The men sit here." 1987 in Pennsylvania. And I'm sure many villages throughout our country were like that and maybe still are today. It was really just a man's domain. I mean, I think the craft beer movement was one to encourage women into drinking beer. Just one. I mean, it's not about men or women, for goodness sakes, but.
And I think, too, the other side of at least a partial answer to that is that as brewing and distilling became large money-making ventures, large amounts of capital, that happened at the same time that there were societal expectations where women weren't going to go out and be that business person, be that face, be that person who kind of engaged with what was seen as the masculine enterprise, as the cult of domesticity and the role of women within the home, and there are certain ways you're going to behave, rose, then something like brewing and distilling from two ends, both in terms of who the customers were that it targeted and what behaviors were needed in order to make those businesses thrive. They both sort of shut out women. I will say that if you actually look at the history of 19th century urban areas, there were some where to a certain degree women were still in that world. They were still making whiskey illegally and selling it up 3 flights of stairs in a back alley, but it wasn't overt. It wasn't on the surface. Go ahead in the back and do we have where's the mic? She's coming. So that we can make sure everybody hears you.
So you've talked a lot about the business aspect of running your breweries and distilleries, but I was curious about the chemical process of making the beer and the whiskey. Can you explain how you create your recipes? Did you hire someone who had experience in that, or did you just start experimenting yourself?
So at Denizens, and then I think Carol should definitely answer this for the beer side. So we have our third business partner is our brother-in-law, Jeff, and he had been a professional brewer for a number of years, brewing in Philadelphia for Iron Hill, and then immediately prior at Mountain Sun out in Boulder, Colorado. And so he makes all the recipes himself. It's just from his experience and professional training. I homebrewed for a really long time. I'm actually a horrible brewer. It takes a lot of dedication, a lot of attention to detail, a lot of consistency, and it's just, I get too impatient for it. It's just not my strong suit.
Well, I actually did my research in Germany. I wanted to do all traditional German-style lagers, so I actually traveled around Germany to understand the style and then come back and brew it the way I thought it should be for stouts. And I did hire a brewmaster consultant, an old German brewmaster from Pabst, and he helped me develop my first 3 recipes. And then I was kind of on my own because you take a recipe and then you understand your chemistry, how things go, but then you make it your own. And there's a combination between half science and half also the artistry involved with it. And just knowing your ingredients, knowing your yeast, knowing your equipment, because I've had people come brew on my system and do you remember Old Dominion? Jerry Bailey came up and wanted to make golden lager. He loved the golden lager, and he said, I'll just sell it in the D.C., Northern Virginia area. And so, but his beer was like a stepchild because, we want to not copy each other. We want to take a beer and just kind of make it our own. Is that answering the question? So it's science, but it's also artistry, and like I said, understanding your ingredients. And it's so exciting right now with all the different hop varieties and different yeast varieties to play with different recipes. And you try a recipe and you can tweak it. It doesn't go into package unless you really perfect it to be your own. Is that good?
So for us, we have a pretty substantial innovation process, we do slow cycle products, which are year-long innovation processes that are really consumer-driven and market-driven. And then we have, on the other end of the spectrum, we have what we call our fast cycle products, which are just about constant engagement, partnerships, collaborations with other producers, internal curiosities. But I guess an example of our innovation process would be our gin, which is a Dutch-style gin, a Jenever. It's whiskey-based. And so for that, you know, we spent a year looking at botanicals, roasting them, macerating them. You know, we started out with 72 botanicals. We created families of botanicals that we thought worked really well together. We started distilling through and then bringing in a group of 48 consumers over and over again for blind tastes and focus groups, so that at the beginning of the process, nothing we were doing was very appealing to them. And by the end, we were in blind taste beating what we held up as what we thought was best in category. And then, so that's to get it out the door. And then every batch after that, we work on continuous improvements and we work on continuous feedback, so that it took us, we've been making that same gin for 6 years now, and this year we won best gin in the country for that gin.
So did that answer the question about distilling?
So this is a little abrupt, but we want to give people a chance to use their drink tickets. We want to give you a chance to come up and talk to our panelists in person. So before that, please join me in thanking. This has been a really fantastic, amazing panel. So I am sorry about that, but you know, this obviously would have never ended. So, but thanks a lot.